I'm Andrew Peterson. I'm the executive director of IFP, also an independent producer, and we'll chime in every once in a while with a few things about that. But you have an excellent panel here today, assembled by Craig Rice over here, a friend, who will be able to hit on distribution from every imaginable angle. To my left is Dan Satorius, who's with the Satorius law firm, also an independent producer. His clients have included Academy Award, Emmy, Independent Spirit, and Sundance Award winners. He's been doing this for over 25 years and has a great deal of experience to impart and wisdom. Laura Ivey, to Dan's left, is the president, correct? I didn't have my page in front of me. Of the Exchange, which is a production, finance, and foreign sales agency. When I was at Works, we had the pleasure of working with the Exchange on a film of ours, Thin Ice, and also an independent producer. And then to Laura's left is Tim Grady, who is, many of you know, with the festival here, wide and varied resume. He's the founder and president of Adopt Film, which is an exciting new distribution company that kind of came on the scene with a bang just a couple of years ago. He also works, has owned the rights to the Tour de France for years, and has some interesting distribution models and experience from that. And then going all the way back to working with the Man Theater chain and traditional distribution models. And just wanted to welcome everybody here to the panel and the panelists here with us today. Today we were going to talk mostly about new models and platforms, but I thought it would be good to start with just what's in place. What's been the model that sort of has set the standard? In some ways, Laura, you come in, you're with the Exchange, you come in at a very early stage as far as distribution goes. A lot of times people think of distribution when they're done with their film, but you look at a film's distribution before and help them set the budget and help them and direct the script and casting and.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, in today's, at least the models that I operate in, which is probably the $2 million budgets and above, you know, nobody sets their budget in today's world without thinking about what the international market, the value of it is. So we will, you know, read a script, even with just maybe a director, maybe a couple pieces of cast, and really help them sort of determine, well, we think we could sell this for 2 million, 10 million, 0. 200,000, which traditionally is something that then people will go and rework their budgets oftentimes. I mean, because there's not very many, you know, pieces of collateral that you can finance a movie with. It's, you know, tax credits, foreign sales, and domestic distribution. Those are the revenue sources. There aren't really any other ones. Some sponsorships, some things like that, but those are sort of non-traditional. So if your distribution revenue isn't supporting the size of your film, so if we tell you it's 2 and domestically you're going to get 1, and you want to make it for 10, you're probably not going to get somebody to give you 10 because they're never going to see their money back. So yeah, we work a lot with helping filmmakers and producers sort of say, this is where we think the level that we can help you is.
And the markets that you look at when you make up those determinations, is it primarily theatrical?
Well, no, I mean, generally we'll sell, you know, every rights that you see here are rights that we sell internationally. We usually sell them as all rights deals. So, you know, theatrical, non-theatrical, pay-per-view, digital, video, pay TV, basic cable, and free TV. Those are all the same with some variation of rights that are available throughout the world. So if we sell to a distributor in Turkey, they generally buy those same sorts of rights for their territory, and they put it out directly in Turkey. So it's all the same rights. Not all films, and I'd say largely, depending on the size of the film, at least half of the movies don't go out theatrically internationally because it's just too expensive, as it is here. But they still buy the rights, and they still take all rights generally. That's 80 to 90% of how we sell a film is all rights.
And Dan, I was gonna ask. You also come in at a very early stage. You're engaged with the filmmakers from the start. There is this idea of making a film and then looking for a distributor. That seems to be a model a lot of people follow, but maybe not the best.
Yeah. What I encourage my clients to do is once they find a story, to think about the audience, kind of start at the end and work backwards. And so you start with, who your audience is, why are they sitting in the seats, or however they're consuming it, what are they consuming it on, what type of screen, whether it's in a theater or on an iPhone or in their home or whatever, and how they acquired it. So, is it subscription? Is it pay? Is it free? Is it whatever? And that will tell you who the distributors are. And then now with that, your audience and the distributors, and then you need to figure out, how did you get your film to those distributors? How did you find them? Who are they? What types of films, other films do they pick up? And what did it cost to deliver to those filmmakers, or to those distributors? Did you have an agent? Did you have an attorney? Did you know them directly, or did you get them directly? And what was the delivery costs? And then working backwards in that fashion, then you know kind of how you're going to do this business. How much money is involved? How much can you make? Just like Laura said, if it's $30 million, that's what the revenue is going to be. Then you don't want to make the film for $10 million. In fact, you don't want to make it for $4 million. You want to make it for $3 million. And then, you can also determine out of this process, what the production values are. Not just because of the budget, but who do you associate with the project? The talent, the principal crew, and all that sort of stuff. And if you go through that whole process and you find that it doesn't work, the story the way you are going to tell it doesn't work, then you have to make a change. You have to either decrease the budget until it fits. You have to find more money somehow. If it's not going to be out of exploitation, then you need to do grants or sponsorships, or find a wealthy angel or whatever, all of which are legitimate ways of financing a film. Or you go on to another story. So, for distribution, you really think, I would encourage my clients to think of distribution as a creative tool. I think all of the independent world needs to focus on this, but I think this community as well. There needs to be some significant thought to the commercialization of your project. And I know this is not a popular concept, but I think it's really essential.
Well, it speaks to the filmmakers knowing their audience from the beginning, and then knowing how to market it. And Tim, for that, it's like, who is the audience? It's like there's so many different outlets for products now. You've had experience with so many things, from the Tour de France to the Man Theater chain, traditional theaters, and now with a lot of festival experience. There are so many niches out there. With your company, I'm wondering, with Adopt, what do you look for?
Well, I have the luxury of looking at finished product, which most of it's European. And most of these films, like what Laura does, pre-selling markets, they've already sold the entire European market. So they're looking to America for not too much money in some cases. So you can do some fairly reasonable deals for product, but the cost of opening a film in New York and LA, which you have to do a VOD deal, a decent deal, you have to have at least 20 theatrical markets opened. But for example, a film like Barbara we picked up, we overspent for the acquisition because we were a new company, and we decided to go after 5 or 6 films in Berlin in 2012. Yeah, 2012. And we bought 3 films right off the bat. Saw the films, went to the sales agent, went to somebody like Laura and said, here's our deal. We didn't stop bothering him for, every hour we went back. And you have to do this. You have to really do it because somebody else is lined up. They're doing the same thing. And we ended up closing these deals on a Thursday. We left Friday morning. and the award ceremonies were Saturday evening. And every film that we bought won a prize. The grand prize, the second prize, third prize, and so on. And one of the deals I made for a film that's playing tonight called Caesar Must Die, I just loved the film after I saw it in the screening. So I marched out, called the sales agent, and I said, you know, what are your expectations for America? She gave me this crazy number, and I said, cut it in half and we've got a deal. And then we got it down lower, and I said, I'll give you a bonus if it wins the grand prize. And we thought Barbara was going to win. And the film won, and it's Caesar Must Die. It's a brilliant film, and the Tavianis are hugely important filmmakers in Italy, but they're a tough sell in America. And we opened the film, it played the New York Film Festival, we opened it in Lincoln Plaza Cinemas and the Angelica Theaters in New York. And if you put, I realized this when we bought the film, if you put the word Shakespeare, prison, black and white, you've lost your audience. You don't have an audience. But we loved the film so much, and it wasn't that expensive. It wasn't that expensive, and we're behind the film 100%. But it performs beautifully in festivals. But, you know, LA was a disaster. And you can open New York. I mean, these are small art films. They're not the kind of films that Laura's dealing with. And you can open New York, and we spent maybe $500,000 around the country on Barbara. And that film will gross about $1.2 million, and we won't make any money until the ancillary markets kick in. And we'll be lucky if we make any money after that, because everybody takes 20% of this, the aggregators and everybody else. So, but the luxury is that you can see a finished product. A lot of the European and East European films, South American films, whatever, they've financed the entire film already, from pre-sales to 60 or 70 markets. Caesar had the record for Rise Cinema. It was sold in 80 countries, which is huge. So they look at America and they say, well, whatever we get from America, let's just take a little bit here and it's fine. But then you have to deal with the talent. And for a small distribution company, I don't want to get too far into this, but we picked up a French film called Café de Flore, and Johnny Depp's wife, ex-wife, Vanessa Paradis, was in the film. And you have to have them all come into New York, you hire a publicist, so there's a lot of cost. And so she said, oh, we'll come in, it's fine, but I have to fly first class from Paris. My bodyguard flies first class, my makeup person flies business, and then whoever else comes is in coach. So that's what you run into. They all want to be paid. And eventually she decided to come into New York, and she was shooting a film, and she was lovely. And we didn't have to pay anything. She did all the interviews at my apartment, and it really was great. But everybody, you know, the Taviani brothers had to stay in the best hotels. We bring them into LA. We took them to this little hotel in Santa Monica. They walked in the lobby, and they turned around and said, we're going to get on the plane now. We had to put them in the Four Seasons. So anyway, so you can buy this stuff at a reasonable rate, but coming to America with a dwindling art film market, subtitled film market, then the cost of publicists, the cost of talent, the cost of advertising, you know, it's a worry.
Yeah, and
but it's a lot of fun. Come on.
Yeah. What you're talking about, too, is just to wrap up a little bit, I wanted to sort of get a grounding in what's traditionally out there. This is what you've outlined is the way it's often been and has been for quite a long time when dealing with theatrical releases, right, and launching those and the money involved. And then there's a whole spread with how the money is split between distributor, financiers, production company, actors. And that's the model that everybody's worked with for a long time. I was reading the other day in the New York Times, I think they called the theatrical release a remnant of the last century.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem for the kind of films that we have. And if they're subtitled, it's even more of a problem. And I think ultimately we would like to open up a film in New York and go into VOD in a week later, or at the same time. But if you do it at the same time, you can't play a theater in New York. You have to rent the theater yourself. You have to, it's called four-walling the theater. And I was mentioning to Patrick, a filmmaker here today, one of the big examples, and Laura, you may know the final numbers, but that film Arbitrage was Roadside Lionsgate rented the theaters around the country, and they spent about $1 million renting theaters. And they went day and date VOD. And the film had all sorts of stuff going for it. It ended up getting a nomination, I think, for a Golden Globe or something. It was just basically a glorified TV movie, but I think it grossed $27 million between VOD and theatrical, something like that. Was it?
I'm not sure it was quite that high, but I think they did 12 in VOD alone.
12 in VOD alone, yeah.
Probably the highest VOD to date.
Which is a big number. So they just tested the market, and that's where it's going. And there was a good article in the Wall Street Journal, which I actually just saw the headline and read the first paragraph, I think, on Friday. And I've noticed this happening at dinner parties and everywhere else. People are talking about TV all the time. They're staying home and they're watching television. Episodic television will kill the film business, like the music business has been sort of run off in that direction. So you talk to people at parties, they're talking about, I don't know, make it up. What are the HBO stuff? And it just keeps going on and on and on. And the box office this weekend apparently is kind of weak, and they had attributed maybe the VOD release of Iron Man 3 on Friday or something. So, you know, I have a 26-year-old son, and they don't even go to movies anymore. You know, if you come to the film festival, it's old people like me. So I don't know where the market's going. But Laura, you work in a more of a genre-driven, or you used to, right, with After Dark, the sort of the horror genre with After Dark, right?
In the past, yeah.
Yeah. And that's South by Southwest, that was the hottest genre going. That was people were buying films left and right. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for distribution, at least in traditional distribution, and I think that it is changing because of what I'm going to say, which is according to the MPAA, I think, you know, on average, 485 films are made per year. I mean, that's a astounding number of films. That's feature films, theatrically made feature films. And if you think about it, there's 6 studios, and they each do maybe 10 to 12 releases a year. So that's 60 to 72 releases from them. You've got the Lionsgate, Summits, Open Road, Film District, those sorts of levels who do probably another 10 each. And then you have Roadside, you have Adopt, you have lots of smaller ones who maybe do, depending on what they do, maybe 6 to 10. Right. So there's at least half, if not more, of those films that get made that do not get a theatrical release. Although everybody, filmmakers that I talk to at least, that's all they want. That's all they can think of. That's the only distribution model that they think of is theatrical. And not only will I say it's very rare to find it, it's also extremely expensive and a loss leader. Almost every theatrical film that's released is a loss. You know, even the film that gets $100 million at the box office, the exhibitor keeps 50% of that. And they've spent probably at least 35 to 40 to make $100 million. So it's a loss leader, it always is, and that's why you won't find it very often. It's very rare, which is why VOD is a new, extremely important platform, because the barriers to entry, which is what's been the problem in the past for traditional distribution, are coming down. The idea that to get distribution, you have to know the right people. You have to be able to call the exhibitors and get your film in the theaters. Well, there's 36,000 screens in this country, but there's still a lot. When you have movies coming out on 3,000 screens, you don't have very many of them, and there's only certain A screens, B screens, and C screens. And so the fact that almost anybody can submit their film to a lot of these VOD platforms, and VOD I'm using as a very general term, and Dan knows this, that there's a lot of variations within that, but almost anybody can submit it and get certain models of distribution. The problem still becomes, how do people know your film is there? That is still the ultimate problem with distribution, and that always was theatrically. The only reason that Theatrical spent $25 million to release a movie is because they had to put it on television everywhere to make sure you knew it was coming out, and you knew to go to the movie theaters whatever weekend Iron Man opened. So you can go on Netflix now. You have a lot easier entry to get there, but when they have 36,000 movies, how is somebody going to find your movie? That's still the question that you have to answer.
It's, you know, I was going to say that it was interesting. The film Bachelorette came out a little while ago. Made 400,000 theatrically, I believe, and it was a $3 million movie to make. It's seen as a success, I think, primarily because of VOD. And it's their filmmakers traditionally define success in theatrical release. Only, and that is not where the money's made. And you can bypass that and be a success, because for the most part, I think, speaking for filmmakers, it's you want your film seen, but you want to be able to make your next movie. And the next movie is based on success of the one before. So it's like you don't need to, there are different ways to define success now.
Yeah. I mean, theatrical never was the financial success. Even when the specialty films came out and they spent some time in theaters, where the value, the value proposition for independent films used to be in home video. So you would sell tapes and then DVDs, and that was the value proposition, and that's gone away. Before I came over, I was checking on where we're at on how consumers consume movies, and this is a year ago, but this is the most recent information I could find. In Screen Digest, the number of movies and television shows legally streamed and downloaded this year for the first time will surpass the demand for those films and shows on physical discs. So our where we used to make money, that is in home video, that's all now being replaced by streaming, and which is good. I think more people are consuming more product. The problem is that a consumer pays about 51 cents for every movie streamed, for example, on Netflix, compared to $4.72 for movies rented or sold by DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. So, you know, we're trading, like, this is the old adage, but we're trading dimes for dollars, you know. We used to make money on the dollar level, and now we're making it on the dime level. That's a lot of dimes, but it doesn't, you know, let's see, what is it? So the yield for physical media last year was about 11 billion, and for digital transactions it was 1.7 billion. So we need to be smarter about the marketing, knowing that it's moving into the digital format. But that's where the action is.
We hear a lot about DIY and transmedia and some buzz terms that go out. When you're talking about these other platforms, is this a way for the filmmaker to bypass a traditional distributor and do something themselves?
Well, yeah, and what people talk about self-distribution, and I'd like to not use the word self-distribution. I would say direct distribution, because nobody distributes, nobody makes a film, nobody does anything in the film business by themselves. You can definitely go directly to distributors, go you know, through smaller distributors or aggregators, or you can even put your film up on YouTube or Vimeo, but that's an economic model that can work if all the other numbers leading up to it work. So.
But it's sacrilege to ask a distributor. Does a filmmaker always need a distributor?
You know, no. We've done some service deals. We have a couple of service deals where the filmmakers come to us, and they pay for the ad campaign. We place it into theaters across the country, and they keep all the box office receipts. We take a fee for that. Richard Abramowitz in New York is one of the most well-known service deal guys. He's done a lot of films. Exit to the Gift Shop was a very successful film he did. And it works if you're a filmmaker, you want to retain your rights. Because you're going to sign, I don't know what you guys are asking for, but we ask for 12 to 15 years rights. And that's a long time. And I want to go back to one thing that Laura said about the theatrical market, is that getting the right theaters is crucial. And when we bought the 3-4 prize winners in Berlin, I got a call from Dan Talbot, who was the founder of New Yorker Films, the first art film distributor in America. and he owns the Lincoln Plaza Cinemas with Gaumont and the developer of the apartment building. And he said, let's have lunch. And he said, I'll play all your films. And here are the dates. And they were almost a year later. And the average Sony Classics, which is the primo specialized distributor in America, everybody lives in their shadow. The average time between they buy a film and it goes on the screen is 15 months. So it's a long time. You have to have the right theaters for the specialized films. With, you know, Iron Man 3 or whatever, every AMC is going to play your film. We can't play AMC because we can't find an audience there with a specialized film. It has to be these key little art markets. And if we open in LA, I'll make it up. We do 50,000 for the week in LA. We'll do 25 in New York. We'll do 50, 25 in LA. LA's half the market for art film.
LA doesn't have any culture.
It doesn't. No, but and you go to the best theaters there. We go to the Royal all the time, or the Sundance Theater in West Hollywood. It's a beautiful theater. It can't gross a dime. You know, I'm serious. It's scary. So you put all this money, and the other thing is, Laura said 50% for the box office returns to the studios. Specialized market, we settled with Landmark not too long ago for a lot of money, and they paid us 41% of the box office. And you have to pay all the ad money.
Yeah.
And then you pay a virtual print fee when you place the film into their theater. That's the digital print fee. You pay the theater manager, who's the so-called publicist, and you already have a publicist, so you just get, you know, the 41% is really, when you look at it, it's really probably about 25%.
But you make all that money off of popcorn, right?
Right.
Yeah, we do.
None.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say, that I would say, Andrew, in terms of does every filmmaker need a distributor? No. You can, especially now. I think, you know, if you want to go into the movie theaters, yes, you do, because they won't book you. But if you want to try one of the new models, you can do it yourself. The difference being, it comes to marketing dollars. You're not going to be able to get people to know you're there. You still need a distributor to probably spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're going to spend to put newspaper ads in, to put, you know, some kind of radio, television, whatever they're going to do to let people know wherever your film is playing, whether it's on digital or not. Unless you can raise that money yourself, you can access the platforms, but nobody's going to know you're there. So you're not going to earn any money.
Yeah,
I'm going to naysay you. That is certainly true for a film of, you know, of a more substantial budget, but a lot of people in this room are working on much reduced budgets, and there is a way to divide, you know, do split rights deals. Basically, you know, you're selling your distribution rights to a broadcaster, hopefully, and then home video rights to somebody else, and maybe foreign to a third party. And if you've been smart about building an audience, and this is, I think, the key going forward, and maybe we can come back and talk about this more, but if you can identify your audience and through the production process all the way through distribution, communicate with them and let them know, you know, if it's scaled, everything is scaled right, you know, you can make revenues, you can make book off of that, and enough to go on to the next film. So maybe we can come back to that and talk about, and a lot of people I think in this room have ideas about this. But on the smaller, you know, whether it's a documentary that has a certain segment of the population, you know, a certain interest group that's going to have an interest in the film, or even a theatrical, you know, genre-driven films are very successful in finding, you know, the niche audiences. I mean, I think there's a way of doing that. If you need to have a budget of some size, nice if you have $100,000, you know, depending on, you know, how you're reaching that group, how you reach that audience.
Yeah, when I hear the term DIY right now, which is, I think, used a little too broadly, I tend to think of it more as the filmmaker as marketer, and the filmmakers become a little bit more engaged in the marketing of the film, which can be through film festivals, and it's trying to get it to the attention of a distributor, and also speaking of festivals, and I was going to pitch this to you, Tim, is what I've found in the last few years is people looking at festivals as their own distribution platform.
Yeah, that's the model that's taking place with a lot of East European filmmakers. And would they rather sell their film for $100,000 to somebody and line up the rights, give the rights away for 10 to 15 years, or can they go to 50 film festivals around the country, ask for $1,000 or 1,000 euros, keep the rights, and get $150,000 to $100,000 out of the U.S. market without selling their rights? So festivals are hugely important to a lot of films, and there are a lot of films in this festival from IFC, which is really very healthy. They're a healthy distributor in the VOD market. They'll open New York, LA, and be on VOD the week later. So they've discovered that word of mouth at festivals is really important to their films, and that they won't play necessarily in a theater in Minneapolis. And I think festivals are kind of, like it's been said, they're the kind of the new art houses of America. And if you're a distributor and you go to a film festival, unlike Cannes or Berlin, which are markets, you walk in here and, God, there are 300 people in there for a certain film, and you think, wow, what a hit. But you realize that this doesn't really represent the real film going public. So you can be swayed by buying a film based on what's happening at a festival, and it's totally different. Now, and we've seen this in a lot of places. You know, our films sell out at film festivals. As I mentioned, some of them are hard in the theater situation. But back to sort of self-distribution for a second, and this is really, I mean, Michael Moore had built up this massive email audience and Facebook audience, and Fahrenheit 9/11 is the largest grossing documentary of all time. And I don't know how much Harvey Weinstein spent on advertising, but I don't think it was, I think the film grossed $100 million. I don't think he spent $20 million on advertising, because they had built in this market of Michael Moore. And that's what you really have to do. You have to have this social networking thing going. And, you know, it's amazing if you go to some films or some filmmaker sites and you're struck by how many people have watching them on Facebook. And so that's really, really important. And we're very slow in that area, at our company anyway.
Yeah. And just, I was going to speak to festivals. I program a festival, and I've worked with Sundance in the past. And recently, Cinetic, a management company and a multi-hyphenate company out of New York, launched an online-only distribution model. And they called me as a programmer and said, what films don't have distribution that played really well at your festival? We're looking for online rights only. And that was about 3 years ago they did that. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. And it was like, so we sent them 20 titles and said, these are all films that we believe in that did well and don't have distribution.
Well, yeah, and the other site you can go to is IndieWire, which has Snag films.
Yeah. And
they came to us. I saw them at a party a few weeks ago. And they said, look, we like your film so much, we'll take a 10% fee instead of 20. But the problem is then you've got to go and look at what their numbers are. And nobody likes to give out numbers in the VOD market. It's really a mysterious market, because they don't want the filmmakers to know they just, you know, made $10 million in the VOD market, and they only have, you know, small percentages in that secondary market. But yeah, it's a hugely different market, and I think Snag just doesn't have the population yet. So there are all these, so if you put your film up on VOD, you go to these multi-system operators, the cable operators, and they'll drop it up online, and nobody knows how long they're going to stay up there on the servers. They could be there for a month or 2 months. iTunes is a really great market, but I've talked to a number of distributors who haven't recovered the $2,000 or $3,000 digital delivery fees from their films. It's just unpredictable.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, a lot of filmmakers will go for the big piece. They'll want everything, but at a certain point you start chipping away. Okay, I'm not going to get theatrical. Now I'm not going to get paid. You know, HBO is not going to buy my film. Now you're looking at other markets, and you get down, and you know, just the validity of having that on. There's value in, even though it's not a money maker. There's value in having some level of distribution.
Yeah, I mean, I think with somebody like Netflix, which is, you read 51 cents viewing on that, but that's a subscriber service. It would be higher, you know, it's $8 a month. It would be much higher. Your return would be much higher on iTunes. But there are certain films that even Netflix shine away from. So if you've got a film that nobody knows about and it hasn't played anywhere, and if your film has grossed less than $75,000 at the U.S. box office, you know, they're probably not going to pick it up. And we work with somebody who has an output deal with them, and so you go over the numbers, and let's just say, you know, we got a film that's grossing over $1 million, so we'll get a $45,000 advance. But they pay it in 10 quarters. So you really don't, you know, it's just, you're really not making any money in the end. And that's it, though. See, that's it. You're not going to get any more money from Netflix because it's a subscriber service. iTunes and streaming, Amazon, you know, there'll be a larger revenue stream ultimately. So it's complicated. But the other thing is that, to Dan's point, smaller films and so on, but if you walk into an aggregator who's going to put your film up on iTunes, there's going to be a marketing budget they're going to ask you for. They can't just slap it up there. They've got to do something. It's whether it's on the trailers at iTunes or they do some publicity. So you're going to be nickeled and dimed for a lot of little fees here and there. And but you know, I say if you're a young filmmaker, you can't get a distribution deal, go to every festival you can. Network. Somebody like Laura will come up with read your next script and fund your whole project. But don't shy away from the festival circuit. It's a lot of fun.
One thing that I think that we could all learn from is the music industry. And I was talking to Craig about this last night. And he said, everything comes from the music industry. All the lessons to be learned come from the music industry. So I don't know if it's all, but I think that there are some important lessons. And some of it we touched about before, which is, you know, the music industry has, you know, always shifted about how they make their money. You know, in the last 30 years, they cry about, you know, the industry went away, but it shifted even before that. Originally, when they, you know, well, I don't know originally, but back in the Tin Pan Alley days, they made money by selling sheet music. And so Edison came up with this idea about, you know, records, right? Well, records initially were a loss leader for the sale of sheet music. And then, as we know, it took over, you know, and there was, you know, they sold the vinyl for many years, and then the CDs for many years, and then the internet came, and the industry basically had its entire inventory stolen in a period of a few years. So nowadays, the music industry, you know, makes very little money on the sale of units. That industry has really been hugely devastated. So even if you're talking about downloads or whatever, not much of that is being sold. So the equivalent of the people in this room, the artists and the performers, have figured out other ways of making a living, making a business in the music industry, and that includes not just the sale of their music product, but also live performance, T-shirts. You know, they build an audience. Basically, they create a demand for themselves, not just the product, not just, you know, the song, but them. You know, they create an energy around what it is that, you know, they're about. And so people are starting to consume that. They buy the T-shirt, you know, they come to the concert, you know, they read about it. You know, it's an experience that's being sold. And as filmmakers, we can learn to do that. We can create via social media. We can find an audience and create an audience and connect with them. And we can sell them not only our present product, but we can sell them the next product. And with respect to the first product, we can create derivatives from that have value that can be sold. So it's not just the one-time experience, but it's also, you know, the experience on the website. So kind of a multi-platform exploitation of the work. It could, you know, you can create a game around it. You can create a series. You can sell T-shirts. You can. I don't know exactly what it is, and I'm not saying it's T-shirts, but there is an equivalent to that merchandising, creating derivatives of your work.
Well, I can answer T-shirts. I can go on to T-shirts here. But when I do the Tour de France, I've had the rights to the Tour de France for 25 years, and luckily. Greg LeMond won the Tour de France, the first American, then Lance Armstrong. And I had created this, I had the rights for the North America, UK, and Ireland. And we would produce a show out of London on a satellite and have everybody out on the Tour de France. But as Armstrong started winning in 1999, came back from cancer, the whole story, I had the merchandising rights to the Tour de France as well. So the best thing about T-shirts, you sell a T-shirt or a hat, it will never come back. You know, they'll just give it to somebody. So there's no returns at all. Basically, you make your T-shirts, you sell them, you package it with a DVD, and so on. And this really drives, that kind of drove the DVD market. And the DVD market for the Tour de France was incredibly healthy. It's now down to about 20% of what it used to be. And this is my last and final year, thank God. But selling all that stuff together, it really makes sense. We just picked up this Harry Dean Stanton film. Some of you may have seen it in the festival. I fell in love with the film. It's a wonderful little piece on Harry. I didn't have to pay too much money for it. And T-Bone Burnett, the record producer, Harry sings 8 songs in the film. Chris Christopherson's in the film, David Lynch, Wim Wenders, and a few other personalities. But we're going to try to produce the album and package it in the DVD market and see what happens. But you can find all sorts of tie-ins. The problem with doing something, you know, with a film festival here, and I'm sure Andrew does this, you show a bunch of Russian films or Scandinavian films, you go to the Scandinavian groups, you go to everybody. And these people do show up, but it takes a lot of legwork, it takes a lot of time. And if you say to a mainstream publicist, usually in New York or something, oh, we need you to go talk to the Italian Cultural Center, they say, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to do that. We'll just get some press or whatever. So, but that's where your audience is, especially for specialized films. And it's hard to find those connections. And packaging in the ancillary markets, like the DVD market, which is dwindling by the week, is very, very difficult.
Yeah, you know, we're going to open up for questions just a second. I have one anecdote I was thinking. I was talking to Ali Saleem, who made Sweetland a while back, and he used festivals as a way to sort of, they became this way for him to discover more about the movie he made. He said, I didn't realize until I went to festivals that I made a movie for my parents. The audience was everybody in their 60s and 70s. He said, I thought I was making it for myself, for people my age. There's a great opportunity in festivals to really do some audit, to learn about your audience, figure out who that is, take that knowledge then out to help you figure out what other festivals to go to, other ways that you can market, and as you were saying, places that you can cross-promote and find other revenue streams. Not every movie has a soundtrack, not every movie has a T-shirt, but when you find out who your audience is, you can find out what they want.
Well, the thing about that film, Sweetland, as well, Ali Saleem, it played every film festival. And Ali's the most generous guy. He never charged any film festival, any rental. We played it here, and I think we sold out 4 or 5 screenings. And what happened after that is I said to Ali, I wasn't in Adopt Films yet, and I said, you have to talk to this friend of mine, Jeff Lipsky.
Yeah.
And you do a service deal with Jeff. So he did a service deal, and the investors in Minnesota here put up about, I don't know, must have been $500,000 to $700,000 in an print and ad campaign. They opened New York. He opened about 100 theaters around the country, and the DVD market was very strong still. And they got a deal with Fox for the DVD rights, and everybody got their money back for the P&A, not the production costs, I don't think. But he was virtually on the festival circuit for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, throughout Europe and America, and it's a great experience. But he ended up getting his film in distribution. I never understood why nobody bought the film at that. Like, I couldn't figure that out.
It was a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sold the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan worked on the film, and.
Right.
We couldn't figure out why.
But it was the theatrical that turned the trick. Everybody loved the film, right? But nobody knew how it was going to play. No, I mean, everything has to be proven to the distributors. So the loss, once again, theatrical was the loss leader. But as a result, we sold DVD or home video to Fox, and then subsequently we sold broadcast and foreign to MGM, and you know, the revenues are good. So
I found the most interesting thing about that just was this idea of the aging of the people who actually take the time to go to a movie theater, and have been trained through their whole lives that that's how they interact with a movie. And you know, a movie like Boynton Beach Club that Roadside picked up, and you know, actors of a certain age that are starring. These movies are making money because these you have young people who will go see Iron Man and go to an event movie, and then you have an older clientele that's trained to go to movies. And there's this chasm in between. Also, the young people they don't have any problem watching a movie on this. So it's you know, that there's a change.
While they're also on social media on their laptop, and they have the game on, and then they watch, you know.
But now I do want to open up for questions, but I want to throw it to Laura quickly, just to say we've talked about the past, we've talked a little about the future. What is it? Where do you see this heading? Where do you is it? Are you know, with the theatrical things are going out? Are niche markets the thing to exploit for an independent filmmaker? Have you been finding anything that you see?
I mean, I think it's hard to say. I think for the filmmakers, I think, you know, the mindset has to change a little bit in terms of what you see as sort of distribution success of your movie. You know, I always find, at least in the conversations that I have with filmmakers, that ultimately you want people to see your movie. You know, and there are premieres on HBO that, you know, 10 million people see at one time. And 10 million people are not going to go to the opening weekend of your movie in a theater. And there probably 10 million people won't see your movie in a theater. So you have to think about what is it that is a success for you in terms of the film and getting people to see it and what that means. I think that it's going to be a really interesting world because we have the new markets. And they do allow for people to, you know, have smaller pots of money. There still is money involved. But much, much smaller numbers. I'm talking, you know, thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands versus millions of dollars. That opens up a lot of windows and opportunity. But you're still going to have the same issues you're going to have with the distributors that I deal with on a daily basis. You know, they have to look at either niche movies like Adopt and like Sony Classics and those sorts, Roadside, or they need to look for extremely broad 4-quadrant movies, and those are the studios and even the film districts and the open roads of the world. And if you don't fit into either of those places, you don't fit in their model. And that's not going to change because it's ultimately, and I've said this, you know, Dan sort of spoke about this in the beginning. I know this is about being creative, but ultimately it's a creative business, and the operative word is business, at least in the areas that I deal with. You know, I mean, nobody's going to give you $100,000 to go make a movie, or even $100,000 to go release a movie if they don't think they're going to get it back. I mean, it's not charity, generally speaking. And so it's still about, you know, a business and framing it from that. We are making creative pieces, and that's a wonderful part of it, and that certainly, you know, drives me to continue doing what I do, but it's still is going to be, you know, all the distributors are driven by the dollar that they can make and ultimately actually not lose. You know, and it's far, 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 far easier for them to say no than it is to say yes.
As we open to questions, that's what I was getting, what you spoke there is what I was feeling myself, which is just that we talk about new platforms and new models, but some things stay the same. It's always about people have to make their money back, and it's the market dictates. And even if you can self-distribute and get out wherever you can, it's just, again, it's whether or not that distributor feels that they can profit from what you've done. Let's open it up for questions. Any from the crowd to start?
Yep.
I had my name is Grady, and I had a film open here at the festival, the Fabulous They Say, and I've been advised to get an advisor. And so I've called Peter Broderick and I've called John Rice, and they're both very interested in taking my money for their advice, which is not surprising at all. And then they've both offered that they would rep me for 15% past that. And so I just want to know, like, from you all, do you think it's a good idea to get advice like this, or?
Tell a little more about your film so we can know what it is. Documentary
Okay,
length.
it's a feature-length documentary, and it covers the formation of the brand new art form of the touring ice show, how it dominated live entertainment for 4 decades, and then has transformed into skating today, which is the competitive style and Disney on Ice style shows. So I have a niche market of millions and millions of people, because just one of my shows was played to 350 million people in its 70-year history. So, and I have 4 major shows in my film. So I know I have a big, strong niche, potentially strong niche market. And I just, like, you know, I'm a first-time filmmaker. It's my premiere here, and I'm greener than green. And so I feel like getting advice would be a good thing. Like,
I tend to go to Dan first.
All right. First of all, it's a great documentary film, and I've been working with Carrie, so I'm going to say what I already told her, which is that I think it's a great idea. There are certain specialty advisors, like John and Peter, who can help guide you through the process. So basically, and there's this, I don't know, John has kind of coined this new position, which is the marketing and distribution producer. So you have, you know, your regular producer, line producer, all those sorts of producers. This is another sort of producer. For independent films of a certain type, you need someone who, from the beginning, as I was advocating earlier, has the mind, you know, set on how is it we're going to market and distribute this film. So John and Peter are very adept at doing that, and they can, you know, help people walk through the process. You know, if you can do that yourself, that's great. You know, I think all filmmakers need to learn more entrepreneurial skills, but these advisors, I think, are very useful in helping you find, and I think, you know, The Fabulous Ice Age is a perfect example of a film that has a really huge potential demographic that it can hit. So the question is, how do you do it? And these people can help you do that.
I mean, a thing that I would say is, if somebody thinks that your film can be successful, having them take a fee on the success of it is completely standard. Paying them up front, I wouldn't do. I don't think that's aligned. That's paying them up front and them maybe not doing anything. I've seen it time and time again. I don't know them. I know of them, but I don't know them, so I'm not speaking of them directly. But 15%, I would say, is high in my experience. Depending on
like
what
a producer's rep.
Yeah, as a producer's rep, that's high. But I think it also depends on what are they helping you do. Are they helping you raise funds? Are they helping you get access to video distributors, VOD distributors? I think the one thing that is important for people who don't know is networking. They know people to help you get your film out there. You probably don't. And, you know, if somebody calls me and I don't know them, I'm not as responsive. That's probably generous, as I would be if it's somebody I know, because I've got a ton of people calling me day to day, and if I know them, I'll return their call because I know it's probably something they specifically know what I do and why I do it, and they're calling me because they think it's appropriate. But if it's somebody who doesn't know, then it's harder to get in the door. So networking and relationships is extremely important. That is definitely worthwhile to hire somebody who has the right relationships, but it just depends on what it is you're seeking to do.
Yeah, I think it's rare that filmmakers are asked to be everything these days, and it's easy to beat yourself up to say, like, I don't know how to connect my film to an audience, and I should. And that's not. I think you should always go with an expert and somebody who can do that for you and do the heavy lifting. And the first pitch is just the start of a negotiation for the fee. I don't know if this came up for you, but I encounter a lot of times when it comes to documentaries doing an alternate TV cut. Doing that 56-minute one in addition to the other one to give yourself some more options for marketing the project. A lot of times it's easier. You may just lose one storyline, something. I mean, it's perfect in your director's cut, but it's realized everything you want it to be. But that will give you some other flexibility and possibly other revenue streams. Yep.
I just got an idea from sitting here with you guys. What do you think? Who wants to work with me on this? A documentary about all the creepy, scary, insane distributors who are out there ripping people off. I give you my 3 nightmares. Nightmare number 1, you got your film, it's in the can, you're ready to distribute it, you got an offer, distributor takes it, looks good, a month later comes back and he shows you this really bizarre poster for it. It's the most disgusting, you can't even talk about it, it's just disgusting, sicko film. And they've lied, they've cut your film into pieces, they've re-edited it. So those are the real creepy crawlers. The second kind, it's a well-meaning producer, distributor, buys your film, takes your film, and then he shows it maybe once in London or something, opens it for a week, and then he sits on it for the next 5 years, and he won't sell it to anybody else, so he locks it up. The third nightmare is you've taken it to the festivals, it's gone out, and now all of a sudden, these strange copies of it start appearing in DVD or on you know how they're doing it. They're bootleg copies and they're going around. So you go to your distributor and you talk to them and they say, interesting, I would have given you X amount, but I'll give you about a quarter because these copies have been all over the place. Ah, but they're crummy copies. We can make you a really great copy and quality. And you say, it's still not that interesting.
Well, okay. I can't answer all that, but when we do posters and press material, we actually go back to the filmmakers. We're a small enough company to do that. But I will say on the film Café de Flore that we bought, which is a French-Canadian film, we discovered it on an airline flight from Detroit to Toronto. And then we discovered the film in a couple public libraries around the country. And the French-Canadian distributor, we confronted him. He said, "No, I'm not doing that." There was a copy in the Minneapolis library before we even opened the film. So we couldn't control a guy in Canada, and we couldn't afford to sue him. We got involved with the filmmakers. They eventually stopped him. But yes, I mean, from a distribution point of view and from the filmmaker's point of view, this guy was selling it all over the world. And he was doing whatever he wanted to do without respecting his territory. But yeah, there are plenty of stories like that, and the guy opens your film up in London, then shelves it. This happens all the time because they've run out of marketing money, or they don't believe in the film. They believed in it at one point, and then they realized how much it's going to cost to move to the next phase, and it'll sit there. So we have a couple of those. No, we don't. But there's it happens. You know, I mean, what are you going to do if a film opens in New York, L.A., and it bombs? And I'll give you an example. We opened this film Sister during the film festival, New York Film Festival. We opened it at Lincoln Plaza Cinemas. Great film. It did okay. It didn't do great. And we had it booked throughout the Landmark chain. The Landmark buyer called me up and said, "Geez, Tim, looks like you got a turkey on your hands here." And they canceled all our dates. And I said to Mike McCleary, the guy, I said, "Look, Mike, do me a favor. Minneapolis, my hometown, let's play Minneapolis." He said, "Okay, I'll do it for you." Well, we got a pretty nice little ad campaign going. We talked to people. It was our highest gross out of New York City. But they dumped the film. They'll dump your film right away. If you're not, you know, New York is the table setter for the nation. So you got to do some numbers. You won't make any money in New York with the 90-10 deals and at Film Forum or Dan Talbot. You'll gross $100,000. You won't make any money. They keep it all. They keep it all. And so, but you have to be noticed. So if you're a distributor, all of a sudden the film tanks, your hands are tied. You can't go to certain markets in the specialty business. Landmark, you know, they pretty much control a lot of the product. And they have their own distribution company. So,
But it's still constantly about business. I mean, the movie theater is there to book a film that draws people to the theater. Not only to make money off the ticket price, but primarily to make money off the popcorn and the Coke that you buy when you go to the movie theater. So if there's a movie that opens up anywhere and it tanks and it was booked for 5 more theaters the following weekend, they're not going to pick it up because they know that that's not going to draw people to their movie theater. So I mean, it's still about money. It has to be. None of these places are here to open their doors and pay their rent and not make any money.
Yeah, and it's in Minneapolis. I love Colin Covert, but it's a one reviewer town. And Colin loved the film. It's a great film. He loved the film, so we did well with it here. So you really still need print reviews. But I will say too about print costs and advertising costs. We had an investor was looking at our company, and he had sold his financial businesses in New York. He moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. He was worth a couple $100 million. And I said, look, one of our films is going to open at the Camel View Theater in Scottsdale. Watch for we're just going to be reviewed Friday, 4 stars in the Arizona Republic. He said, Tim, I don't read that paper. I'm from New York. I get the New York Times in the morning. Then I read the Wall Street Journal. I said, then you take a nap, right? No, he said. And he said, I don't read the local paper. So the thing is, you may have a great film, and you have these pockets around the country where these retired people, or all people down in Arizona, they're reading their hometown paper. They don't care about the local. So you have to figure out how to get an audience. And this brings me to a point about the Camel View, which is a great theater, and the film, Dustin Hoffman's film Quartet, and your point, Andrew, about the older demographic. The film did 100,000 in the first week down there, which is huge. And it's the older audience going, it's not the young audience at all. And the film actually ended up being a success, and it'll do very well in the VOD and the DVD market. But you can waste so much money marketing these films. And you don't know where to go. You have to have this really big campaign of social media.
I was going to say that I'm not an apologist for distributors about this, but the first film that I produced was World in Time Enough in '94. It opened. Strand picked it up. It did very good numbers in New York and LA. It played Minnesota and did like maybe 10,000, I think, over the weekend. There were only at the time 4 or 5 art house screens here. They had a deal with Miramax for the next week. They kicked us out, though we had great numbers. That Miramax came in and filmed and did $1,000. They lost money, but they had to take care of that relationship because Miramax gives them X number of films a year. Strand gives them 1 or 2. And so you can do really well and still get kicked out. And it's not a problem. That wasn't Strand's fault. That was.
Well, one thing I just want to clear up here. You mentioned that the distributor might chop up the film. That was one of your nightmare scenarios, and come up with an awful poster that you didn't like, and maybe not account to you or whatever. I mean, a lot of those things are going to happen anyhow, but a lot of those things you can also address in the distribution contract, so that you don't have to just sign the contract that's being given to you. And it's very common, especially for quality distributors, like Adopt, in the specialty market, they're very sensitive to filmmakers, and they will at least consult you on the posters, and they'll agree not to re-edit your film except for to maybe shorten it for time purposes for broadcast. That's one general exception. The other might be for purposes of local, regional, laws having to do with profanity or whatever. Standards, yeah, right. So you can protect yourself to a large extent by those contracts.
Question?
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for all you guys have talked. You're all incredibly sharp. It's really nice to be able to hear so much no-nonsense kind of wisdom in this thing. Me personally, I'm making a transition from being a music video director into going into the process of developing a feature film. I'm curious about the etiquette of approaching folks in similar situations to yourself as distributors. If there is obviously there are a lot of wrong ways to do it, but I'd be very curious about what the right way is to kind of find a willing ear in a situation like that.
Well, we don't really look at, Laura looks at stuff in the script stage and so on. We looked at one film in Cannes a year ago, the Christophe Menjou film, Beyond the Hills. He made this other film, and I can never remember the title, 9 months, 14 weeks, whatever. And they offered us the script for the U.S. market. We looked at the script. They wanted $250,000. And we knew we were going to pay $250,000, but we knew IFC had distributed the film before us, so we moved it up to $300,000. We knew we were going to get it. And IFC ended up paying over $300,000 for the film. We dodged a bullet. They took it because the film was a disaster. But and these French producers really took over his view of the world. He's a Romanian filmmaker, a very talented filmmaker, but the French started supporting him, and they changed his style as a filmmaker, and it's not very successful. But we don't generally look at things that way, although we'll say John Stout is the lawyer in town here we work with, and we have put out a couple distribution pre-deals where we have first look at certain films that are yet to be funded, but we don't put any money in at this point. John could probably explain the deal later on. It's been fairly attractive to some filmmakers. But Laura is she's got all the money, let's face it.
I would say you need to talk to somebody like Dan, first of all, because we don't generally accept anything that's not repped. I know everybody hates to hear that, but it is a protection mechanism for us. Number one, I would get inundated with material, and we just don't have the time and the manpower to read it all. But it also protects us to know that the material we're getting is from people that we know or know of, at least, and it's coming from reputable places and protects us down the line in terms of somebody claiming that we took their script, that sort of thing. So I think the first and foremost is, if you're developing material, you need to find some representation, and start there. I think one of the things that I would say, pulling from this panel, is if you're developing material, develop it with a sense of who's going to watch it, because that is ultimately what will drive what you can make it for.
Also, what you're looking for, I'm assuming, is financing.
Well, financing I've got to a degree.
Okay.
And I tend to work relatively, coming from music video in this current market, a lot of times I'm just dealing directly with the artist. So I'm working with kind of small budgets between $2,000 and $5,000 for a video. So the money's kind of out there. I'm accustomed to working in a very guerrilla fashion. I have a very small team that I work with. And so with respect to that, budgeting is not so much the issue. I think it's more about efficacy, and it's an issue of whether I'm going to be better off. I mean, if I had my druthers, it would be to produce the thing, make the film, take it to festival, and try to rep it in that way and get in the door. But I am curious just on that insight, because I do see the value. Obviously, I come from a background of working with music. And a band that I work with also just got national distribution with respect to that, and have gotten into the licensing game. So I've seen firsthand the value of what a distributor has done for us within the context of the world of music. And hearing all of you talk, it gives a good sense that obviously you need to be thinking about your market. For me personally, understanding what the niche is or what that, who you're aiming for. But I see the value in building that thing if you're able to, with a synergy with the distributor in advance, that they know what they're getting, they have their fingers in it, and that you're not making missteps along the way. You can really kind of course correct on a regular basis. But I'm just kind of looking for options there. But it's very good to know that in your case, for example, representation is absolutely key. But that's, finance is not the issue. It's more about access to people that are going to be able to get that thing.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it depends on what level you're operating on. I mean, at my company, we would very, very rarely look at anything less than $1 million to $2 million. It's just the level sort of that we operate in. So if you're talking about making something for tens of thousands, and you can get that money, I have never been an advocate of make a movie and go to a festival and roll the dice, but that's because I operate in $2 million worlds where nobody should do that. I mean, that's crazy because, you know, those $10 million Sundance windfalls are extremely rare, although everybody hears about them and thinks they're not. They are very, very rare. But if you're making it for 10, 15,000 and you have that, a festival is probably the best place to get you the most exposure at that level. Because you'll get more people to see it. If you send a $10,000, $15,000 budgeted film to adopt, just like on a cold call, you're probably not going to get seen. But if it's something that can kind of catch something at a festival like this, people are going to hear about it. Distributors are going to hear about it, and they're going to start to either go to see it or to call you to see it.
Yeah, you know, the micro budgets, the festival route is really strong for that. But also, you have to look at Sundance and say 3,000 films a year, 120 or 170 get accepted. There are so many out there. You need that festival stamp of approval in order to get people to recognize you, because there's too many out there without it. But when it comes to financing, when I was interacting with foreign sales agents, it's the first time for me. I've got a project that I'm directing and I've written. It's a comedy, and Laura was going to tell me, because she's going to. I'm trying to say know who you're talking to and do your research, because what she enlightened me about is that the foreign markets don't really respond to first-time directors and to American comedies, and it's sort of like, so that isn't a way for me to go to try to find money. And she's not the right person for me to talk to help me raise it. You know, it's sort of like it's fine though. You know, do your research about who it is so you know you're talking to the right person and the right company.
Every project is different, and that's why I think it's really important to start at the end of the process how you got to that audience and work backwards, because that's going to tell you, you know. So in your case, where the budget is, you know, several thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, you can roll the dice and see if you can magically capture an audience. But you know, if there's more at stake, then, you know, and take it to festivals, and I think that's brilliant. But if there's more at stake, then maybe your strategy changes, and every project has a different strategy.
Yeah. But one question for Laura, because you sell the European market a lot, and I'm always told that the American independent films are very soft in Europe. It's hard to sell smaller American independent films.
It's true. It's very difficult. You know, we picked up a movie that appeared. We have a movie that appeared in Sundance last year, and we had two movies actually in Sundance last year. But one of them was picked up out of Sundance, called The Spectacular Now. Great movie. Yep, great movie. But what I will tell you, and I have my own phrase, it's a Sundance movie. And anybody who works at where I work or at the level that I work, if I said to them it's a Sundance movie, they'd know exactly what that is, the tone, the feel, the audience of it. And they don't do that well internationally. I mean, our numbers going in, you know, it was a several $1 million budget. Our numbers going in, the financier knew that they were rolling the dice in domestic, and they had the ability to do so. And they, fortunately for them, it's going to turn out extremely well for them. It's coming out in August here in the US, but they're very soft. I mean, they don't play it. Just comedy doesn't translate. Films like, it's in my head right now, Garden State, because of the Zach Braff Kickstarter campaign right now. But you know, those type of movies that do extremely well here, they certainly don't play in Asia. I mean, you can probably count a Big Donut for Asia. So, you know, they'll play more in Europe than they will in Asia, but they don't play that well. So but give a genre movie, give an action movie, and those can tend to do 3/4 of their budget in foreign.
It's very talent-driven, though, for the foreign markets, correct? Other than, say, docs or some topically Americana thing. It is
relatively. It's less now than it used to be. The market, at least in the pre-sale market now, is extremely director-driven, which is why I've said to Andrew that breaking a first-time filmmaker in a pre-sale market for foreign is very, very difficult. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I say pre-sale market? No? Pre-sale market is basically, we have somebody who will give us the script. Generally, of course, there'll be a director attached and maybe a piece of talent, and we will go. There's 3 markets throughout the year. There's Berlin, Cannes, and AFM. AFM happens in Los Angeles in November. Those are the only 3 markets that are for feature films, and companies like myself and 400 other ones descend on these places and hawk our wares, for lack of a better word, to all the foreign buyers. And we'll send out a script, like we're preparing for Cannes right now. Cannes starts May 15th. So we are sending out scripts, we're sending out project announcements. Here's our director, here's our cast, here's the script, have a read of it. We'll send it to 4,000 buyers throughout the world, and we will go to Cannes, and our salespeople have meetings every half an hour for 7 days. We'll put together a list of minimums. So maybe it's a $3 million film, and we'll say, great, we think we can do $2 million out of foreign on a minimum basis. And so we will then go to Cannes and see how much we can pre-sale. Pre-sale means, obviously, we're selling it prior to making the movie. And what people can do with that is you can take them to a bank, and they'll give you money against that contract. So that money will help you make your movie, will help you finance your movie. But the pieces that we sell are extremely important. And one of the biggest things now, more so than it's ever been, is the director. People have been burned in pre-sales, number one. Number two, because the video market is so drastically reduced, and it's reduced throughout the world. In some places, Spain, there's 0 video market now. So it is so different. In the past, people bought a pre-sale film and it didn't quite turn out the way they thought. They could always slap those stars on a video box and put it in the brick and mortar video store, wherever it was, and make money. And that was great. So the cast was extremely important in the past. But now, because video is so in the toilet, they don't have that ability anymore. So they have to make the right choice. And so they have to know that what they're buying is going to be, or they have to have the best possibility that what they're buying is going to be well executed. And the best thing to show that is the director. Because you can look at what the director's done in the past and say, okay, I like the script because you're able to read it. I know this director. I've seen what they've done in the past. I believe that they will make a successful movie. And so, pre-sales are hard now, but they're healthy, actually, for the right product.
Do you want to just explain about minimums when you talk about minimums?
Sure. So we'll take, all the territories that we sell, and we'll say, okay, Turkey's 50 grand. We think we'll get 50. France is 200. Germany's 350.
Minimum guarantees.
Minimum guarantee. So
that's
basically,
advances.
Yeah. So the distributor in Turkey will buy, and we'll sell them the rights for your film in Turkey. They'll give us a minimum guarantee of $50,000. It's a minimum guarantee. It's guaranteed. They have to pay it, but it's the minimum amount. We negotiate, for theatrical, video, television breakdowns. They get to recoup their money, and in theory, if you're very successful, they will pay more overages, which we call overages, but don't expect those.
Somewhat similar to like a book advance.
It's
Yeah.
It's any kind of advance. I mean, it's the same thing. It's generally, we'll pay you this as a minimum of expectation of revenue.
Yeah.
Yep.
It seems like there's a plethora of online and VOD stuff that's done with like Amazon and YouTube and all these other platforms and stuff, and that sort of seems to be, is that all that, and then there's also the cable VOD stuff, right? So that's all under the umbrella of VOD. Is it typical that you can partition the rights for your film that, so there's theatrical, then there's VOD?
Yeah, it's not clear at all, and it's really important in your contract to make sure you're very clear about how you parse out those rights. Mm-hmm. Because the home video distributor thinks that they're getting certain VOD rights. The broadcaster thinks they're getting the same rights. And also there's a question of, territory. So if you sell to Amazon, for US, how are you going to make sure that they don't tread on the rights that you're selling, your European online rights, whether it's VOD or download to own or whatever. So in the contracts, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you define those terms and get them all straight. And one thing I wanted to get back to, the point of splitting rights, doing split rights deals, is that you avoid what's called cross-collateralization, meaning that, you know, if you're selling, let's say, broadcast to one party and you're selling home video equivalent rights to another party, and so that's not the same distributor, two different distributors. So if broadcast tanks, you know, those costs don't go against the revenue that you're getting out of home video, and vice versa. Whereas if you're doing a single distributor, depending on the deal you make, but generally they cross all their markets. So all costs, they pay off all their costs before they start calculating your revenues. You know, so that's one advantage of doing a split rights deal.
How common is that? Like,
It's becoming more and more common, depending on the project. You know, I think it's probably pretty readily available for a documentary, for example.
Yeah. I was going to say I never ever do split rights deals, because it's not the level that we operate in. So it really depends on. I mean, Dan's completely right. It depends on the size, the genre, you know, all of that. And I will also say, I mean, you really, as much as you can educate yourself about what the market is, and when I say the market, I'm at least primarily at this point in time talking about domestic. I mean, you know.
Well, but you split between foreign and domestic.
Oh, foreign and domestic for sure. Those are completely different buyers.
Yeah, right.
Completely different buyers. But even in domestic, I mean, for example, in pay television, you know, in the past has been a fairly generous revenue source. But there's only 3 pay television markets. It's HBO, Showtime, and Encore. HBO's not buying any movies anymore. So there's one of them gone. So now you only got Showtime and Encore, and they're cut back tremendously as well because they're all doing original series now. So, I mean, you know, split rights are hard, and, you know, video, because, you know, you should always be profitable in video, because in theory, if somebody's not, they made a bad mistake, because their costs are per unit. So if they've spent more than they've made, they've got a big problem, which can happen, but it's very, very rare. But because video isn't making as much money anymore, I mean, split rights, you know, people want more to protect themselves, to have more places to make money.
Right. Tim, what do you look for? I mean, for rights, what does Adopt? Do you try to get the whole thing?
You know, we get the whole thing, and as much as we can, but also for the filmmakers in the room, you probably should understand, you probably know this, but if we pick up your film and we don't give you a minimum guarantee, even if we do give you some MG, everything we spend, we get back before you see a penny. And there's, you know, the famous, notorious Hollywood accounting goes into place here. Not for us. Of course not. But really, you know, I don't think Michael Moore, I think he sued Harvey Weinstein over Fahrenheit 9/11, the largest grossing documentary of all time. He didn't make a penny. So, I don't know, but everything comes off the top.
And if you're in the fortunate position of having multiple offers, I think it's good to recognize that sometimes the most money up front isn't the best deal. Right. It's, you know, you have to look at the whole package and the whole, who you're working with, weigh absolutely everything.
Yeah, you know, and that's really true. And what works against a small company like ours, and we went after a film in Berlin like everybody did, a film called Gloria from Chile, by the same people who made a film called No, and it's a wonderful sort of midlife crisis film. Everybody loved this film. And we were called up until 12:30, 1 o'clock at night, wanted to know if we would up our offer. We went to $275 or so. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot of money for America for a Spanish language film or with a potential crossover market, but that's the tiniest part you're ever going to spend on the film, because it's all going to be spent for P&A, marketing, getting an audience. And they said, well, listen, you lost the film. You know, they came back to us, lost film. And I talked to the sales agents the next day. They're out of Paris. And I said, we all thought, and I was having dinner with Richard Lorber, you know, probably Richard Lorber, and he had made an offer, and we should have gone together. We could have done this. But I thought maybe Sony Classics had picked it up. So I went to the sales agent. I said, well, what happened here? He said, you guys were right on with the money. And I said, would you give it to Sony? He said, no. Sony was worried. They had distributed No from the same producers. but they have a long-term agreement with Pedro Almodóvar for all of his films, Spanish language films, and they didn't want to create any problems with their sort of director, sort of they've got 5 or 6 of his films and so on. So it went to Roadside, Lionsgate. Now, if a little company like ours, you got a Roadside, and they say, this is our back end, this is where we're going to VOD. They've got the whole machine set up. It's really appealing. And so that's what you're working with.
And they have big output deals.
Huge output deals, yeah. So, and a company like Sony Classics, which is the premier specialized film distribution company, Stars, the cable network. If Sony grosses $1 million on a film and they net let's just say 50% for argument's sake, that's what they're going to get for a broadcast fee from Stars. So they are very good at what they do, and you can't compete with those guys. So you get the low-hanging fruit, which can be very successful. The films like there was a series of films a few years ago. You'll all know about them in a second, and you had to buy all 3 films. And Laura, you may know something about this as well. And these films were shopped to a number of distributors, and they said, well, we kind of like the first one, but I don't think we want to buy the second one or the third one. Well, it turned out to be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And it was a small company.
The original Swedish version.
Swedish version. Small company in Chicago called Music Box Films. They have offices in New York. Well, they grossed $100 million in the theatrical market.
It created that company out of...
They created a company. And when that happened, Magnolia Pictures and Sony, they locked down the Scandinavian market. They sent people over there who could speak every language, and they started buying Magnolia started buying every Scandinavian film they could find. So nobody is going to let that happen again. And it really created a very healthy company. They're still out there. They're a competitor. They're a good competitor. And they're very smart. But they got a lot of cash, too.
Is it worth kind of talking about what was the output deals? Is people want to... Everybody knows what an output deal is? Would it be helpful to go into that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to do that? So actually, you've created a lot of your own output deals for your various companies. Do you want to? You're probably better suited to describe that.
I mean, an output deal is basically you make a deal with usually it can be a video, but oftentimes broadcasters that they take everything that you release or put out or is your product at certain pre-negotiated price points. So, and at least domestically for the broadcasters and those sorts we're talking about, they're based on domestic box office. Sometimes they can be based on a combination of budget and box office, and sometimes just budget for non-broadcast. But basically that, Encore, and all studios have huge output deals that generate tons of money in the pay TV market and in basic cable market. Basic cable market is, Spike TV, USA Networks, those sorts of things. And they know if they hit $5 million in box office, they're going to get, $4 or $5 million from pay television. They're going to get a certain amount from basic cable. I mean, it's actually how they build their models to determine. They are extremely accurate with what they spend and what they think they can make, and studios, that is. So I mean, that's.
Yep. So the way it comes down to you, if you're going to a distributor, you want to know if they have output deals and with whom they have output deals, and you need to figure out how your film, whether you're just writing it or if you already made it, how it fits into that output deal and why that distributor as a buyer would be interested in picking up your film because of their output deals.
Yeah, and the positive and the negative of that, generally for the smaller film, it would be more of a negative in that almost all domestic output deals are driven by domestic theatrical box office or number of screens. So you have to go out theatrically. And a lot of foreign ones as well. Most of the studios have foreign output deals that we access. We've given 3 or 4 films this year to Buena Vista International, which is an arm of Disney. And we know that if a film goes out on X number of screens in this in the U.S., that qualifies for their Italian Sky Italia deal, or the HBO Asia, or HBO Olé, which is in Latin America. So they all have output deals, domestic and foreign.
And I was just going to chime in. I was like in a happy position with that first film to have a couple different distributors give an offer. And I strongly advocated to go with the one that was offering less money, which is the one we actually went with based on track record, their passion for the film, and the amount of money they were willing to put in it for advertising. It's like, to me, their package in that was so good that they could have offered 0, and I would have said, let's go with them up front instead of this other company. And we did make the money back. And it's sort of like, if you look at it as an advance, it's like they're saying that, you know, if you get a $1 million, you know, buy, that movie's going to have to make $5-6 million at the box office before you're crossing that mark. That's all the money you're ever going to see, and who wouldn't like $1 million? But if you made your movie for 2, your investors are never going to get paid back. It's sort of like, but you look at who's got the best potential to maximize your box office is a huge component of it.
Yeah, and just a footnote to that, my partner in the business who handles the theatrical side is a guy named Jeff Lipsky, who used to work for New Yorker Films. Samuel Goldwyn started a company called October Films, Lot 47. His passion is the theatrical market. And rightly or wrongly, it doesn't work now. It's an older model, but we do have, like Laura said, you have to have a certain amount of box office before anybody's going to look at you in the ancillary markets. And you know, $75,000 is not a lot of money, and that's kind of the low end of the spectrum. But you have to open. You have to open your film. I don't know how many markets did you open your film in, Andrew?
That one was Strand. It's Strand, so
Yeah.
it's smaller. It was 10 markets, but a guarantee of 10, and
Right.
within a window where the marketing was could be useful in all of them.
Right.
A lot of times you'll open in New York, and then you'll roll out city after city after city. You can be 3 months away from when somebody did your press and your national press on it, and it doesn't really mean anything anymore. And and other markets may not pick up on it because it's seen as an old title. So.
Well, and I would build off of that. I mean, I think one of the things, and Dan can fill in the blanks for my basic knowledge of it, but what I think one of the things that I know about the success of Sweetland, and I can even go back further to the original success of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, was that they didn't open in New York and LA, and they spent, New York and LA are by far the 2 biggest markets and the most expensive markets. To open in those cities is extremely expensive, at least $500,000 is a minimum. And $500,000 in other markets, Minneapolis, Austin, Denver, you can go a long way and generate the buzz. Buzz is what you need to get. You need to get positive critical reviews and buzz. And buzz happens in today's market faster than it ever has because of social media. So, I mean, social media can make or break a movie in 10 minutes. Yeah. And I think that I would encourage people, especially you with your documentary too, I mean, don't just shoot for New York and LA. I mean, shoot for the other places in between that, you know, $500,000 of P&A, and I use that as a traditional term, that money will go a long way in between the cities.
You know, I agree. We have a couple other films. We have this Italian film which played in the festival, Piazza Fontana, The Italian Conspiracy. We're not going to open in New York. We're going to go to smaller markets and open. And one interesting concept in the theatrical market right now is something they're called living room theaters. And as a Mexican guy whose dad was a filmmaker, they couldn't get his film placed. They opened up one in Boca Raton, Florida, and one in Portland, Oregon. We go into these locations, and they have a nice restaurant and 5 or 6 screens with about 50 to 60 seats. The numbers are staggering. You don't have to spend a dime on advertising. They have a built-in market. They don't charge you a virtual print fee of $850. You're just pure profit in those locations. And that's really kind of the future. And we're going to test all these little markets because New York, it's nutty, it's expensive, and you don't make any money. So I'll get back to you on this, see if it works.
But also
I'd like
about
to know
just
more about that. That's
the opening weekend numbers are really, with Sweetland, that's what got a distributor's attention, or it was, opening in the right place. I've used I've referenced this film Boynton Beach Club, which is, in Florida. They opened in Boca Raton. Roadside came in and picked it up after it saw the numbers it did in Florida. It did not open New York until a distributor picked it up.
Yeah, let me give you a little footnote on Florida. It's surprisingly strong. It's an older demographic. Some of the numbers we see in Boca Raton or Orlando, I mean, they're really impressive.
Yeah, so to use your film as an example, I'm not sure what market, maybe there's a market that makes real sense where it's going to do huge numbers better than in, say, New York, if it were to find a theatrical.
Well, my parents go to the movies more than I do.
I know.
I mean,
Yeah. We are running out of time, and one more question from the room? Yes?
So you've talked a lot about the past models versus what you think is going to happen in the future and what's currently happening, and also how there's some things that stay the same and they transcend all of this. Is there anything that any of you would like to comment on or say that is completely different than the old models, that is there's just, like you just mentioned, this living room theaters, which I had never heard of. I think it's fascinating. Is there any other tidbit like that you might want to mention before we're done?
well, I'm personally, and I'm on the board of a film festival in Los Angeles, so we have this conversation all the time. I'm curious to know what Theatrical is going to be 10 years from now. It has to be event-driven, which is more on these types of theaters that they're building more and more now, where it's dinner. It's the Alamo Draft House is a great one in Austin, where you can order your dinner and your beer, and they deliver it to you while you're in the movie. Theatrical it has to become an event, because when people can see a film, and they will be able to see a film at the same time in their living room, it may cost them a little bit more, but they're going to. You have to have a reason to drive people into the movie theaters, out of their house into the movie theaters. And I honestly don't know if it's going to be a market in 10, 15 years, because is it going to be that event driven? Is it going to become like rock concerts? I don't know.
Can I disagree?
Yeah, please. I don't know.
I mean, this is like, is television going to kill theater? Going to the movie theater. Is DVDs going to kill going to the movie theater? The theatrical numbers are predicted to increase by 2 or 3% over the next 4 or 5 years. Now that might be ticket sales, increased ticket sales.
Yeah, ticket prices.
Yeah. Yes.
That's going to go up. That's for sure.
I think I think there will be theaters. I can't predict beyond 10 years. I mean, technology just is so disruptive. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think what people will do in the future is they'll start consuming on the best available screen. So if they are in a car, maybe they'll look at their iPhone to consume the video. If they're at home, maybe they'll do their big screen. If they're in a class and bored, maybe it's their computer. I think is what's going to be the dynamic change. Is people will just consume when they want to, not by
most convenient.
Whatever's the most convenient screen.
I think it's age-driven, and I think people of a certain age are always going to have a movie theater experience. But I do think, these mobile devices. I was reading a study recently. It's like they're used just as much in the home as they are mobilely on a plane or wherever. This is how people are engaging their content now. Christine Vachon, a very well-known producer. Independent producer, I work with her on the festival that I run. We were talking about this, and she doesn't call herself a producer anymore. She calls herself a content provider. She said, I don't want to dictate where this project is going to go out into the world.
She would have known that before we did the titles on the movie.
I know, right? It's a little sad at some point, but also there's a great opportunity here. This is about the next generation and how they're engaging their content. I think that event movies, yes, but niche movies in the past. I came from more LGBT content at a time in the '90s where people were hungry for it. They weren't seeing these images and they were desperate for stories, and they would fill theaters. They don't anymore. Because now it's we've gotten past that. It was the same with us with African American content. It's sort of, there are these things. I don't know where the next wave is, but there are certain markets that are always going to want to get together in a communal experience and see their lives on the screen.
Yeah, I prefer that, but I would hate to be in the theater business right now. I wouldn't invest in a theater unless it was a living room theater. But I think what's going to drive VOD, and we've had some discussions with multi-system operators about this, is as soon as they take VOD and they say you go on Comcast and they actually start programming it. We've all had the experience. You go on iTunes, you look at trailers for a half hour, then you say, "Screw it, I'm not going to watch anything. I can't find anything to watch." As soon as it's programmed, like a festival, or I'll make it up. Say, like AMC does these series, and they find films out of their vault. I saw a Robert Rossellini film about a month ago. I couldn't believe it. Never seen the film, and they found it. But as soon as you program a VOD and say, this month we're doing a Martin Scorsese retrospective, then you've got an audience, and then it becomes more episodic, like Game of Thrones and whatever else it is. That people are watching this episodic stuff. And that's where people are going to stay home. I got my little Best Buy thing the other day, and there was a 90-inch screen. The investor I talked to in Scottsdale, he probably had a $500,000 screening room. And I don't think he needs to go to a movie theater. So that's the future. I mean, I like going to the theater. I mean, it's a real experience. But in the festival here, I'm just struck by how few people under 30 we have. And you probably see it at your festival too.
Yeah, no, they've aged with us. I've been doing it 10 years, and I think they've aged with us. We've run a little over.
Right.
So thank everybody.
Thank everybody. TV board for bringing this to us, and the Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival for bringing for this. Go and see some films here. I want to thank our panel one last time before you go, because this is the discussion that I wanted to have them have, and they did it, and without any direction from me other than do it. So.